Welcome to today's Student Chef informational webinar. We are excited to talk to you today. As always, we're going to share our school nutrition mission and vision with you. School nutrition is a valuable partner in education, pledging to provide coordinated support for outstanding student achievement through our commitment to excellent service in each of these core areas. They are quality meals, student and community engagement, and professional development. So at this time, I want to introduce our presenters for today. Presenting this content to you today will be Michael Dubose. He's our culinary specialist. Another one of our culinary specialists, John Huff. And we'll have our wellness support specialist, Adrian Holloway. So they've popped on the screen to wave to you guys. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michael to get us started with today's content.
All right, great. Thanks, Ro. And I want to welcome everybody and thank you for your interest in the Student Chef competition for this year. So today we're going to share a little bit of an overview of the competition and the best practices and kind of demonstrate how to use the competition platform and at the end answer your questions. So I'm going to pass it over to John to get things started.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. On the screen here is a list of our kind of key important dates and deadlines for the competition. You'll notice that all of them don't actually kick in until 2024, which sounds like it's a long way away, but I promise you it's right around the corner. So just starting at the top, you have to have your team registered by the 12th of January. And then within a week, you have to complete the first 11 steps of the portal. A lot of that is just typing in a lot of the information about your team, what the recipe concept is, and that sort of thing. And then you have another week to be able, or a couple weeks to be able to finish the last steps 12 through 15. On Valentine's Day, February 14th, we'll announce the finalists for both the middle school and the high school competition. And then in March, we will start scheduling the in-person finalist competition. For the high school level, that will include the students actually preparing the meals for us to be able to come into their kitchen to be able to taste the meal. And then for the middle school, that will involve the culinary specialists preparing the meals ourselves and then being able to do taste tests and that sort of thing then. But I will say that if you are having any challenges with meeting any of these deadlines once the competition starts, please let us know. In the past, we've had some issues with maybe teammates moving or for some reason not being able to finish the competition and you're kind of scrambling to find a new teammate. We will work with you as much as we can to be able to kind of extend, or we have some flexibility with some of these deadlines. So if you get to the point where you're like, we can't do this, we'll just be out of the competition, please don't think that's the case, because we will work with you as much as we can to make sure that the team is able to go through the entire process. All right, so on this slide, it kind of breaks down the key differences between the high school level and the middle school competition. Both the high school and middle school teams, you have to have a minimum of 2 teammates and no more than 4. And the grade levels that we consider high school is grades 9 through 12, and for middle school, that is grades 6 through 8. All of our teams must have an adult supervisor that is an employee of the school that they attend. And that should be most of you guys. So we really appreciate all of you joining us today. And you can also, one advisor can have multiple teams. So you don't have to have every team doesn't have to have a separate advisor. For the high school team, we're looking for a credited entree for school nutrition. So there are 3 different options there: meat alternate plus a whole grain, a meat alternate plus a vegetable, or a meat alternate and a fruit component to the entree. And then for the middle school team, it has to be a side that meets the half-cup vegetable crediting requirement per USDA guidelines. All of the recipes, no matter if it's high school or middle school, we ask that they be able to be completed within 90 minutes, and that's from getting in and doing your prep all the way until the completion of the recipe, and it must be portioned to be able to meet those crediting requirements that I mentioned before. And you'll find any additional information regarding recipe requirements in the Student Chef overview document that we'll drop into the chat.
Here we're talking about a little bit of the little nuances of the recipe template. We have provided a template for you. It is in an Excel form. Make sure you keep it on that Excel form. That's very important that you don't transfer it to a PDF or another format. So leave it in that Excel format. When you're doing your recipe, make sure all the ingredients are listed in order. And also, one component of this competition is using Georgia grown items and USDA items. So what you want to do in the ingredient list, you want to make sure you mark those in there so you get the credit that you're using those products. Make sure that your instructions are nice and clear and descriptive. You know, try to keep one task per line just so the flow of the recipe is very easy for us to follow. So like John said, with the middle school, we will go and replicate that recipe and we're going to follow the instructions exactly. So that's how they're going to get scored on that. So we don't make sure it's clear and precise. The recipe needs to be original. Doesn't mean you can't find something on Pinterest or a cookbook or something. If you do something as a start, you need to reference that where you got that base recipe from, but you're going to need to make some type of significant changes to it to make it your own recipe. As far as the template is concerned, food safety is always a big aspect. So you want to make sure that you identify those steps in your recipe. Sometimes people forget to put that in there. So that is a scoreable component of this competition. Make sure you list all your equipment that you're using. This is from small wares to the big equipment that you're cooking with. And then one of the most important parts on here is the way you name your recipe. That way, because we have a lot of teams and every year this competition is growing. So we need to make sure we name these recipes so we can identify the recipe to the right team. So for example, your recipe, you want to make sure you put the recipe name, period, your team name, period, then your district. So that way it identifies you and we are keeping everything nice and clean. So here's an example of the recipe template. And you see circled here, we have the recipe source. So here's where you're going to put on there that you had your idea came from a base recipe from another source like Instagram, Food Network, something like that, and what it was. And then what you'll ask for, we'll look at that. That way we can compare what you did and what you how you changed that recipe.
On the screen is this is exactly what it'll look like on the template as far as the ingredient list. Your team will then just fill it in as far as the amount, the unit measure, and then the ingredient name. And you can see circled on there, this is a way that we can identify what is your USDA item that is included and also your Georgia grown. So you can just put in parentheses at the end of the ingredient name, parentheses USDA or parentheses GA. That way we know it's clear for us to be able to look at it. And like Michael had said before, I can't reiterate this enough. Make sure that your team is listing these in order in the way that they're going to be then prepared in the instructions on the next section. A lot of times we'll have follow-up meetings with some teams and they'll be like, well, what did we get counted off on? And because the initial steps that we're looking at, we're not actually preparing the food until later on in the competition. So a lot of what we're judging it on is kind of the nuances of filling out a recipe, making sure that the unit measures make sense and that they're listed in the proper order. So that's just a little tip to help your team along. And then this is an example of the instructions. Like Michael said, try to keep it at a minimum. You know, don't try to put an entire paragraph in each one of these sections. Try to make them to the point, but include everything that you need. So you don't want to over elaborate, but make sure that when you're reading it, it makes sense. And they are also in order. And you'll see circled there as well that we have those HACCP or those food safety temperatures circled there for you to be able to see what we're looking for in a proper recipe. So whether it is if chicken needs to be cooked to 165 degrees, or if something needs to be chilled to below 41 degrees in a certain period of time, make sure those are included on there as well, because if we don't see those, that'll be another area where points will be deducted from the competition. And then the last slide before I pass it on to Adrian, there is a section on the template for the equipment that will be used. There's no piece of equipment too big or too small to be included on this. You'll notice on there that our very top one is a combi oven, which is a very large piece of equipment, and it goes all the way down to a tablespoon measuring spoon. So as big as an oven and as small as a spoon, include everything that you think you can that will be used in your recipe on here. And with that, I'm gonna pass it on to Adrian.
Well, thank you so much, Chef John. So good to be here this afternoon. So we're going to talk a little bit about the recipe and getting feedback. So as our student chef recipe developers and creators, it's really important to get information and feedback on your recipe concepts. So we encourage and we want your student teams to discuss their recipe with the school nutrition director or the school nutrition manager. They have a lot of insight to working with school nutrition recipes. But we have some good questions for you to use when you go in and talk to your school nutrition manager or director. So the first one is could this be served as a part of a school meal? Does it fit? Does it work? Are the recipe ingredients that you have selected for that recipe? What do you need to have available to purchase? Are there any concerns about the cost or expense for the recipe ingredients that you are going to utilize? Do you have the necessary equipment that you need to prepare the recipe? And lastly, do you think this recipe will be able to meet those nutrient requirements? This is an excellent opportunity for your students to practice their interpersonal skills. They get to connect, and they also get to connect with school nutrition professionals. All right, so one of the ways that you can get feedback is by making recipe modifications. I'm sure our chefs can attest to the fact that you never start out with your first recipe. It's always important to take a look at that recipe, and this is a creative process. And before I dive into this, I also want to let our educators and our instructors know that if you have any classroom applications, we have curriculum standards for Student Chef, and you can actually download those from the Student Chef website if you'd like to utilize that resource. So how do we do recipe modifications? Well, recipe modifications may come in one of two ways. And the first one is a taste test. And we want you to get feedback from students who are going to eat this. So we recommend conducting at least a minimum of 2 taste tests with 25 student participants with a 60% acceptability, a goal of 60% or greater acceptability. We do have taste test forms available. There are paper forms, and we also have electronic forms that you can download from the website. Now, another way that recipe modifications can happen, and this is where this registered dietitian and dietetics practice comes back in, is nutrition analysis. So you might have to make a recipe modification, or students will have to make this recipe modification based on feedback on a nutritional aspect. So it will be something like calories. You may need to make an adjustment for total fat or saturated fat or sodium. School nutrition menu planners go through this process all the time. So it's really important to take heed of that, and you might need to adjust your recipe ingredients based on the feedback that you get. Now, final thing I want you to remember before I move on is that you must complete all of your recipe modifications. All right, next slide. All right, so last but not least, for my piece, we want to make sure that we see this beautiful recipe, but we also want to have a good picture of the team. So some reminders for you. Make sure we have one team photo with our team members, our Student Chef team members dressed appropriately. We also want one photo of the final plated recipe, and the final recipe must be only those components of the competition. So as Chef John mentioned earlier, it is an entree for our high school team members, and then for our middle school students, it's going to be a vegetable side dish. All right. Okay, I will pass it on to Chef Michael.
All right, so thank you, Adrian. So now I am going to share my screen, and we're going to kind of walk through the competition portal here. All right. So as advisors, when you put in your interest in the program, I will have processed it and sent you your user ID and a password for you to sign in. once you get signed in, you'll get in there and change your password and start your process. So you'll build your team. So as you can see right here, and as John spoke earlier, one advisor can't have multiple teams. So like right here, I'm signed in. I have team nutrition, and then also have test team number 1 here. So I have 2 teams under me right now. So I'm going to go to test team number 1, and we're just going to kind of walk through the steps here. So all you got to do when it's grayed out, you haven't got there yet. It's pretty simple. If it's got the color to it, you can't jump ahead. So once you finish one step, it'll unlock the next step for you. And these first steps are pretty basic. So basically right here, team confirmation. Is your team ready to start the competition? All you got to do is hit yes, submit, and you'll see step 2 comes up here and you're able to go to it. So now here's where some of the stuff is happening. These are educational aspects of the competition. So step 2 here is talking about school meals. Again, is mentioning what the different components are. And this one right here, this team is for the high school. There is a pre-check. It's just a quick little quiz that you can do before you do the videos and stuff. Just kind of see what knowledge you have about school nutrition. Then there's some school resources. And then there is a post-check also here. And then I skipped over the video that we have here as well that we want your team to watch. Then you do the post-check. Once that's done, you just get less that you did it. And you move to step 3. Same thing here, talking about Georgia Grown. That's an aspect of this competition, as we mentioned, that you have to ID that in the recipe. So here's, again, the pre and post checks, a video on Farm to School, and how to find out some of those ingredients. Also, a link to our Harvest of the Month calendar, so you can look for that. And I think there's actually bonus points if you're using Harvest of the Month item. And once you watch that video and you've gone through the step, yes, and submit. Here's the same thing, talking about USDA items. There is a USDA list that you can look at for common USDA items that are available to school nutrition professionals to use. So once you view this list, here's an important part right here where you check with your school nutrition director. Start building that relationship. See what foods they are using. You know, that can be helpful, because if you're using something they're using, they'll have a little bit more knowledge about it and help you with that recipe that you're doing. So you checked with them and you watch the video and you hit submit. Now, one of the most important ones is food safety. Watch the food safety video with Dr. Steinberg, and then you just acknowledge that you did that video. And now we're to the meat of the portal here. Here's where you're starting to do the recipe development. So once you've downloaded that recipe template, which we have a link for it right here, we also have the naming standard for how you're creating or naming your file once you create that recipe. And once you have that base recipe to start with done, you're just going to go to upload it. There it goes. Double click on it, open it, and there you can see it right here. It's loaded right here, and then you make sure very important, you hit submit. And it's always easier if you forget it, it won't let you go to the next step. So it makes it real easy for you to keep on top of things. Now let's say, I'm gonna kind of go back here real quick. You grab the wrong file. You can always go to edit here and reload it again and make sure you got the right file there. So you can change that out whenever you need. So now we're gonna go to step 7, school nutrition application. Again, now that you have that recipe built, go back to that director, talk to that director, show them the recipe. Things that Adrian was talking about. Do they are these ingredients something that can be easily accessible for a school nutrition program? Is the cost prohibitive? Is it something that's way too expensive for a school nutrition program to be able to use? Are the ingredients available to use on a regular basis? So that is where that leadership from that director is really going to help your team and also build that relationship with them. So once you check with them, you hit yes, we checked. And guess now it's time for your first taste test. Adrian mentioned about the electronic form. Also, she mentioned about the paper form. So we have links to both of those right here. So you want your team to prepare this recipe, test it with students, preferably want at least 25 people. And then you just want to put in here, once you're done, how did you do the taste test? So you say you did a classroom, how many students did you have? So we did 25. And then put the feedback. And you want to be a little bit more descriptive than this than I am right now, just time for time. So just put that in there, hit submit, and you're ready for step number 9. Now here is where you take some of that feedback that Adrian was talking about, and you can make some of those modifications. So if you find something that they didn't like, it was too spicy or it didn't have enough flavor, and you go back and try to adjust a little bit, now you can go back in there. Okay, yes, we made a change. Then it's going to ask you for what did you do? Submit that. So now what that's going to do is it's going to let us know what the changes were as we're looking for it. So we did that first one and we see what that feedback was on that recipe. I mean, that taste test. And we see, oh, you're at 55% or 50% acceptability. Then you make those changes and we can see in that recipe, we can compare the old recipe to your new one. So we go to the next one. And then here is basically the same thing. I mean, do the second taste test and move on. So here's an important factor here now. So once you did those 2 taste tests and made those alterations, here's where you're going to put that recipe that's been updated and you're going to load this just like you did before. But this is going to come to us. And this is the one we're going to look at and enter in for determining all the nutritional values for that recipe. And once that is in, we will take that and then we will email you back as the advisor on what the recipe nutritionals are. Is the sodium a little bit too high? Is the calories too high? Where to kind of adjust, kind of give you feedback on what modifications could be made. So that's your first steps of 1 through 11 right there, that have that time, that date on it, that's that due date after you start. So now it gives you more time to go in and make alterations again, based on the nutritionals. And step 12, did you make any? Yes or no? So if I said we didn't make any this time, everything was good, you go to step 13. Now this will be your final recipe. If you didn't make any changes, it would be you just reload the same recipe you did before. If you did make changes, just annotate that, then make sure you load your most updated recipe here. Because this is the one that's going to be looked at and going to be judged. So I'm going to do final recipe. And now comes to the photo. So here we're doing the portrait of the team. Just load and you're going to hear, this is an important part right here because now it says by submitting the photograph, you confirm that all students have given consent permission for their pictures and video likeness to be used in this competition. So you got to hit yes there. And now you want to do a picture of your recipe. Submit recipe description for judging. What you're going to do here is put in your recipe name, describe your recipe, be as adjectives, be as descriptive as possible, and then what do you want your recipe to be called that's going to be catch attention. So once you put that all in there, you are done. So now you finished all 15 steps. So now this is the point where you are totally done with stage 1, and then we will take it from there, and either we will score these, and then we'll make announcements for the top high school teams, which we will schedule times to come out and visit. And then the middle school, we will schedule times to go out, and the culinary specialists, the 3 of us, will get out and recreate the middle school recipes, and we'll score them. And then we'll combine those 2 scores to determine who the winners are.
Yeah. So after you've submitted everything and we do our judging through this first portion of the competition, anybody and everybody is able to then reach out to one of the culinary specialists to schedule a meeting with us to kind of discuss your recipe, maybe where some of the, like if you didn't make it onto the next round, where some of the points were taken off. So we just want to be able to open that up to you all so we can have conversations with the students. So it's not just with the advisors. If the students can be part of that as well, we'd love to be able to talk to them one-on-one as well. So these will be scheduled virtually. And we highly encourage it for all of our teams to be able to do this, because being able to talk about the recipes and the food and maybe where some of the shortcomings were will then help them in future competitions. Some other opportunities that students have is through community engagement with us through Godot. So you'll see pictured here is some of our teams from several years, where that's the one in the top left is actually me working with a student at their school, serving their food on the line to their peers. So there's opportunities for that. There's also opportunities for the culinary specialists to be able to come out to schools and do taste testing with students and their recipes. So that's a picture on the right there of Michael in Camden County doing our blueberry caprese salad, testing that with students. So there are plenty of opportunities there. We also recently in our last competition, McEachern High School, who was our winner from last year's competition, was actually asked to be on a panel. So the students and the advisor were both served as panelists for a USDA conference. So they were able to talk about the competition. So that was a really cool opportunity as well. And then one of the coolest things I think for this competition is all of our finalists that go on to the next round, this culinary specialist and us at the Georgia Department of Education with some of our registered dietitians, our food safety experts, we then convert their recipes, which are portioned at 6 portions, into a standardized K-12 recipe for 50 or 100 portions that we then put on our website, and it's dispersed throughout the state. So anybody in the state can then be serving one of your students' recipes in their schools. And these 2 recipes that we have were actually that we have on the screen here were actually submitted to the USDA. So these 2 recipes and I think 4 other of our recipes were selected to be served nationwide. So it's not just locally in Georgia, but they have the opportunity to actually have nationwide recipes on the USDA website there as well. And then the last engagement, if you were able to join us early, if you logged on a little early to the webinar, you were able to hear the Fuelcast episode. That's actually a picture of Hallie and Walker there. They were the Southeast Regional winners for Georgia. They won the entire competition. And so they were actually featured on Fuelcast, which is our podcast. So that's another opportunity that could be a possibility for some of our winning students and advisors. And I don't think we actually mentioned that the high school winner of the entire state is then offered to be able to go to the Southeast Regional competition, where we compete against, I think, 7 other states in the Southeast. And this year that competition will be in Nashville, Tennessee. So that's where some scholarship money comes in that you had heard as well. So that's another opportunity. And with that, Ro, I believe we can open it up to a Q&A.
Yes, I have enabled the audio. I did see a hand go up. Since this group is so small, if you do have questions, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. Philip Garrett, I saw your hand up. If you could go ahead and unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, how you doing, guys? Philip Garrett here, Grayson High School, Grayson Tech. I was asking about the USDA. Is there a minimum, or are you guys looking for 4 or 5 different products, or is it just one each? Georgia, one each,
Yep.
Georgia grown in. Okay, I just want to make sure of that.
Yep.
Awesome, appreciate it.
And Philip, that is all this is also on our website. It's pretty clearly once you get in there, there's no ambiguity. It's very obvious what they're trying to do. So all that's clearly labeled on there. But that's a great question.
Gotcha,
Yeah,
appreciate it.
The
Thank you.
overview covers a lot of that. It's on one of the first documents on our website there.
Awesome.
It's never too early to get started either, because if you wait to the last minute, like John said, you only got a week to get those first 11 steps done. If you start now, you can start getting some of this stuff taken care of and really spend some time on these recipes. But we got a good start. I think we already have like 15 teams for the high school already signed up and starting the process.
We encourage you to like, follow, and engage and share your school nutrition story. If you are not already following us on social media platforms, we encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And if you want to hear more of those insightful conversations through our Fuelcast podcast, locate Fuelcast on whatever platform you listen to podcast on. And if you want to share the wonderful stories that are happening in your district, send an email to fuelingga@godot.org. And as always, we encourage you to locate our webpage at smp.godot.org and save it, bookmark it. There's a wealth of knowledge there, tons of resources that you will find immensely valuable. So thank you for joining us today, and please reach out and let us know how we can be of further assistance. Have a wonderful day.